My name is Bex. I'm in Swadlincote, Minster, and I'm going to be talking to you today on the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 to 47. So I'm going to begin by reading today's lesson. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of the bread and prayers. All came upon everyone, because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. And today's reading really highlights Christian community. And that's the one thing that we're all feeling pretty nostalgic about at this moment in time. We've all enjoyed celebrating good times and sharing fun moments with one another, whether that's been in our church communities or in our house groups, in prayer meetings, just learning together and being together, journeying in faith together means so much to us. And that's why I really felt that today's reading spoke a little bit into our current situation, because it's very much based on community. And one thing that we have a little bit more in common with now, with our early Christian communities, our early church family, is trying to establish a sense of identity, using the Holy Spirit to guide us in that. And that's exactly what the book of Acts is about. It's about how the Holy Spirit really motivated people and steered them into a missional community. But you can only become a missional community when you're sure of your own identity. And that's one of the questions that we're asking ourselves now, because we haven't got access to our church buildings like we used to. So it's really caused us to look more inwardly at ourselves and ask, it's one thing to go to church, but what does it mean to be church? And when we look at these early disciples, we notice that they devoted themselves to 4 main areas. Now, the use of the word devoted themselves in the book of Acts, it means perseverance. It means that they were very much eager students who were keen to persevere in these 4 main areas of their development. The first of those areas was listening and learning from the apostles' teachings. Because, as we know from our own lives, when you are self-motivated, you learn better, you retain the information, and you're able to go deeper with that. And for these first disciples, they studied because they were motivated by faith. And again, that led them then to develop a deeper, more mature faith. And that's what we hope to be able to achieve ourselves. Secondly, they engaged in fellowship. Now, to engage in fellowship, what are they learning there? Well, what they're learning is it's one thing to declare ourselves as Christian brothers and sisters. We love the notion of being a Christian family. But do we follow through with that by our acts, by the way that we treat one another? And so what they were learning was how to truly be Christian brothers and sisters. And the third area they pursued was in celebrating the breaking of the bread. And they did this with glad and generous hearts. And that's because in the early church, the Eucharist celebration really was a celebration. Jesus Christ was raised from the dead. He'd conquered death to save us all. And that was worth celebrating, let alone the coming with anticipation of his coming in glory again. So they had a lot to celebrate. And then finally, they explored prayer and praise together. They did this by learning more about what church was in terms of the church community that they were forming, and how they could then attribute every aspect of that to God. So, what lessons can we learn from the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 to 47? Well, we can learn to persevere in our faith studies. Because if we persevere in our faith studies, we are better enabled in a more mature faith. And by having a more mature faith, actually helps us to have a more robust faith. Secondly, we can persevere in our fellowship. I'm so grateful to God that I know that we're going through this crisis right now. It's trying and it's challenging, but He's actually blessed us with means by which we can continue in fellowship together. We have the invention of the telephone, fabulous internet, and we have snail mail. You can't go wrong. It's a great way of using all these forms of communication to keep in touch with each other. And that's what's really important right now, because we need to keep in touch with one another, to be able to encourage one another in our faith at this time. And then finally, in these times, in our utter dependence on God and not our church buildings, we are left to consider what it means to be authentic church. These first Christians are exploring what it meant to be church. And somehow, through the years, we may have digressed away from that original authenticity. We're quite used to a structured format in our worship services. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we're left wondering at this time, what is our true church identity? So I'm just going to read that last sentence again. In our utter dependence on God, not our buildings, we are left to consider what it means to be authentic church. Remain safe. Remain blessed. Amen.